Okay, I believe we're live. Hopefully the chat can comment to let us know if they can hear us. There might be a small delay. So why don't we kick off with introducing ourselves? So should we start with Stephen?
Hi, I'm Stephen. I'm not convinced people can see us.
I think they can.
They can. Okay. I'm Stephen, also known as Grockies on GitHub. I kind of started Avalonia. Well, I did start Avalonia. I'm based in Italy. Anything else?
I think you've got it covered. You're very modest. You think you started Avalonia. Dan?
Hey everyone, I'm Dan. I've been working with Stephen on Avalonia for many years now. I originally started trying to hack together an IDE on Avalonia many years ago when it was in the early stages, and I just sort of got dragged into it and brought along for the ride. So yeah, I spend all my time working on Avalonia and maintaining it, and lots of fun.
And I'm Mike. I'm the relative newcomer in the scheme of things. I got into Avalonia through trying to port a WPF Lightning controller that I've been working on for basically the entirety of my adult life. It's forever the project that I'll never finish. And yeah, I wanted to run it on Linux, so I started hacking on Avalonia and kind of fell in love. Before that, I was working at Xamarin and been at Microsoft, but I joined Avalonia full-time, I think 2 months ago now, at the same time as Dan. But Stephen's been grinding away at this for much longer. So I think the general idea for today is we'll spend an hour, maybe less, but certainly an hour, just going through some of the questions that we've got from the community, give people a chance to kind of ask us anything. We'll do our best to be frank and earnest in our responses. So we've already had some questions. I think the biggest question that we hear all of the time is when is V11 happening? When's that occurring? Stephen?
Yeah. Soon. The last preview was actually supposed to be the kind of release candidate, but we came upon some more places where we needed to make some small breaking changes. We would like the release candidate to have a stable API that people can rely on and not make any breaking changes between the release candidate and version 11.0. So the last preview, what was it, preview 7, Dan? Was that it? Yeah, preview 7. I've lost count. Is almost the final state, at least of the API. It has bugs that we know about, bugs that we don't know about, as always. But yeah, pretty close. We're hoping this month. I think I just opened a PR which introduces my last breaking change to the items control API. After that, I think we have a few small breaking changes to the renderer, and then we're done.
So we're going to have a RC in a couple of weeks, and then full release hopefully by the end of the month. Is that what we tentatively agreed?
Tentatively, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, don't hold us to it, but it's done when it's done. Don't want to take it out of the oven when it's not ready.
I'm behind the scenes pushing everybody to get it ready for the end of the month, but we also we like to ship quality. So one of our mottos is to not ship shit. So we really want to make sure that it's right when it comes out, and you know, not have a huge disaster like we've seen in some of the other XAML frameworks lately.
Easy now, easy now. Yeah, I mean, so as I say, it's done what it's done. We announced the first preview in August, and when we announced that, we were actually talking about a release at Christmas. So we've definitely slipped, but I think in parallel to V11, we've also been working on XPF, which is like the big revenue generator that allows us to continue working on Avalonia full time and to grow the team to continue to build Avalonia full time. So it's we've got a lot of plates spinning at the moment, but yeah, this month we've got our project board, and XPF is the high priority. V11 is the high priority to get that shipped so that we can begin finding the issues, because a lot of people haven't tried it out yet. So there's kind of the known unknowns, waiting to see what people discover so that we can start fixing. Right, some more questions. Is there a list of updates for what's been added to V11? So we've got a list of changes, breaking changes at least, and I believe that also includes what's changed. But we're also working on the new documentation for V11, and that's going to include an exhaustive list of everything that is different and everything that's new and has been added. Obviously, we've been working on V11 for so long that it's going to take us a while to actually get that list fully fleshed out. So somebody was asking about a plan to introduce a more WPF-like style in Avalonia for regular developers, not just enterprise users. So I'll tackle the not just enterprise users bit, and then I'll maybe pass over to Dan for the rest of it. The only enterprise thing that we really have is XPF, and that is taking your WPF app and running it on macOS and Linux. So we don't really see a lot of crossover in terms of like the styles, because Avalonia styles are much more advanced, or at least we think, than WPF. Dan, do you want to kind of elaborate on that?
Sure. Well, we have talked about, and this won't happen before the 11.0 release, but we have talked about making, where it makes sense, possibly some things from WPF, which would make it easier to kind of copy and paste some XAML. You're always going to have to make a few changes. So I think, Stephen, we've discussed before, we might introduce like data triggers from WPF, and we might one day implement some styling a bit like WPF, but we prefer people to use the new Avalonia style system, which is more powerful and more advanced. Storyboarding is another one that we might look at, but this is like way well into the future. Stephen's on mute.
I'm wondering whether it's actually more referring to like what is it called, an Aqua style, or something more kind of Windows 2000-ish instead of
so like Luna.
I don't know. I can't remember what they called.
Luna was XP, and then okay. I think is Aqua. I think that's Mac OS. Aero, I think, is what it might be.
Yeah.
I think I've seen some themes open source. They're definitely not complete, but I think I've seen some kind of Aero theme that has been started, because I sent it to Jumar. So we've got a guy on the team that loves kind of retro Windows and all of those styles. So I pointed him to that and said, this is right up your alley.
Yeah, if the question is about the look and feel, I think the templates out the box use the Fluent theme, which is more like Win UI, but the you can switch it over to the simple theme, which is a bit more closer to classic WPF. But yeah, certainly we could. I'm sure the community are working on themes that are identical and to those sort of old Aero style themes.
Yeah, as I said, there's definitely one there on GitHub, and we've talked about themes recently. So we were looking at our Fluent theme, which is based on Fluent V1. Obviously, Microsoft has changed things with V2. And so our theme isn't like a one-to-one match, but it's still pretty good for a modern desktop application. And it looks good on Mac OS and Linux as well. But we do have plans that once we ship V11, we'll spend a little bit of time to go through and tweak the current Fluent theme to modernize it more in line with what is available from Microsoft with V2 Fluent.
One of the new features in V11 is control themes that we've introduced. So that makes investing in these kind of different styles and themes for your application a lot simpler. For example, you can now base a theme or a style on an existing one, so you can like inherit them and things like that. So now that it's a lot more flexible, post version 11, I expect to see a lot more themes being developed.
So sticking to the topic of themes, someone said, purely hypothetically, would it be possible to design a theme that would replicate Win7's classic theme look?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
I think the main reason that we haven't invested in anything like that is we want something that will kind of look okay on all platforms. If we were going to go down that route, we then want kind of separate themes for each operating system, a Mac OS specific theme, which we just haven't really got time for at the moment. But yeah, theoretically, it would certainly be possible.
Yeah, we've talked internally about the platform-specific themes, and there's kind of two camps within the project on it. There's one side that says, well, we should have a generic enough looking theme that looks good across all of the platforms because we are cross-platform. And then there's another side, which I kind of fall more into, which is that we would do well to have a Mac OS specific theme and a kind of GDK or KDE inspired. I don't think we need one-to-one likeness, but some inspiration. But yeah, as Stephen said, it's not a priority for us right now. The community is picking up a lot of that work. There's already a brilliant theme, which is a material design theme. So if you want to build a kind of Android inspired material app, then there's options for you there. But Win7, yeah, that is a classic indeed. I would genuinely love to see a Windows 95 theme. I don't know why, but that would just excite me. So what else have we got in terms of questions? So somebody has asked about interesting to read a blog post about our rendering and composition. Yeah, so I agree. I think that's going to be something for Nikita to write for us.
I'd be interested to read that as well.
Yeah. So Nikita is our kind of our wizard when it comes to the graphic side of things. So he built our compositional renderer. The man is a genius. It's a shame he couldn't join us on this call. And yeah, he does a lot of kind of dark arts, and the composition renderer is one of them. So we would all benefit from having some insight into how he went about building that and how it works under the hood. Somebody else has asked, I guess, since we started, what's the roadmap? We've kind of covered it. We're hoping in 2 weeks for V11, we'll have the RC. We tentatively said the 14th, don't hold us to it. And then by the end of the month, we should have it pushed to stable, as long as we don't find any major issues. But it may slip. So what else have we got in terms of questions? Are we considering adding a support plan between 3,000 and 6,500 euros? So it's a good question. Dan?
So one of the things that we want to do is if we're providing a service, we want to give the best possible quality of services to anybody that's paying. And the reason why the pricing starts from that is because with our limited resources, we can't afford to give our full attention with the existing customers that we've got and the other priorities like getting version 11 out and XPF. So once version 11 comes out and those, maybe in the future we might be able to reduce the pricing again. But the reason why it's like that, if you really need our help, that's the pricing for now. But unless otherwise we would just struggle to give you the quality that of support that you would expect.
Yeah, as Dan said, it's all about delivering a satisfactory service to the customer. The price kind of fluctuates. If you look at the website, it's not quite month on month, but it does change enough depending on how much demand that we have. So occasionally what we find is that we'll have a whole host of companies reach out to us and they'll want the startup support. And that typically means that they've got 3 or 4 developers, but they want to buy 1 support seat. And once we onboard them, the first few weeks is an awful lot of work for us because they've normally got quite a long backlog of issues that they want resolved. So yeah, we've adjusted the pricing. So the current startup pricing is what was our enterprise or premium pricing, and it's there just because we need to make sure that if we do onboard someone that we've got the resources to be able to handle that and scale the support team. Because no one's taking out support for the easy questions. It's typically they need like the very senior engineers, so the likes of Dan, Stephen, and Nikita. We seldom get any support requests that can be given to the more junior, even not quite senior. I guess if we had junior, senior, and principal, with you 3 guys being principals, basically everything goes to you 3. So we will obviously adjust our pricing in the future, and we're constantly tweaking it. So do keep an eye on it. But there's also the community.
One thing worth mentioning is that you might just have one requirement, maybe have like one thing that's quite complex that you need our help with, and we might not be able to commit to a full year of support, which is why the pricing is high. But if you email us and give us some details about what you're after, we might be able to quote you to just take care of that one thing that you're interested in. And sorry, Mike, I think you were going to talk about the community support as well.
No, I mean, that's a really good point that we do have the development services. That's actually, in a lot of cases that we've dealt with selling these support agreements, they would have been better off for everyone involved if it were a project instead, where we understood ahead of time precisely what the requirements were and could work on a timeline that suited everyone. So yeah, but as I was about to say, there's also the community support. So make sure you're on Telegram because there's you guys hang out there. Max is on there. We do answer questions on there, and we do try and get onto the GitHub discussions and issues and make sure we're responding there. So it's not like we're totally hands off. It's just we need to make sure that the enterprise customers and the businesses that are building with Avalonia and have the support, pay for the support, that we have the bandwidth to be able to get to them within the 48 hours that we've agreed to.
And also not having any kind of other income streams from paid products means that those support contracts need to pay for everything. You're not just paying for your support, you're paying for development of Avalonia. We need to fund that somehow. Yeah,
which is why we have XPF, but that's that's a process for us because we're shifting the. So we've had the project for what, 10 years now. Stephen, you started in 2013.
Yeah, coming up to 10 years.
Yeah, crikey. So it's been around for a long time, and the team have been grinding on it for forever and worked really hard. And as Stephen said, the majority of the income comes from support agreements. Well, all of the income comes from support agreements and developer services. And the company was created about 3 or 4 years ago in response to the huge demand from enterprises building with Avalonia. They wanted the reassurance that they could reach out to the core team and get their issues fixed, and also use the core team to help them deliver their projects. So building, I'm sure some of you know this on the call, building a business that is a service-based business it's really difficult. It doesn't scale very well. It's super expensive. There's big ups and downs in terms of the demand from customers. So we're trying to change the business into a product business. We don't want to take anything away from Avalonia. So it's all about the value adds. And we've started with XPF, but we also have a long list of other things that we want to be building and providing to people to help fund the continued growth and development of Avalonia. But that's enough about businessy things. There was a question about Astra Linux support. There's a problem with the tray icon, window positioning, and text wrapping. It's a brilliant question. Any takers?
Linux is kind of difficult, as you probably know, because there are so many distros to support. I think the tray icon should already be fixed. The window positioning, that's even more complicated because every window manager has its own way of doing it. I'm no expert on Linux, it's Nikita who should be talking about this, but that's even more complicated. And text wrapping, nothing comes to mind there. But basically, yeah, Linux is so varied that it's difficult to get everything working on every distribution and every window manager. And not only distribution window manager, there are also 2 windowing platforms as well. So, I mean, you have distro times windowing platform times window manager. Like, that's a huge number of platforms to test on. So, yeah, we plan to improve it, but it's kind of a difficult problem to solve.
With window positioning, it's probably the window manager that is the critical part of the equation there. So if you open an issue about it, make sure to specify which window manager is being used.
We officially support Debian 9, Ubuntu 16, and Fedora 30. So that's like the official supported Linux distros. But yeah, if you create an issue, we can have a look at what's occurring with Astra and see if we can resolve it.
We do pride ourselves on being the .NET UI framework that will run on as many different flavors of Linux as possible. So it is something that we do like to help with.
And now we have we just onboarded Jumar, who is another Linux user. Previously, it was mostly only Nikita who was actually running Linux day to day. So I'm sure Jumar will be able to help out with that.
Yeah. So there's a question around some good tutorial series on YouTube, even a tutorial on how you made the Avalonia IDE from beginner to intermediate and advanced.
Oh, Dan's Avalonia IDE, sorry. Yeah. I was thinking, what?
Yeah, at the beginning when I said, I hacked around working on an IDE. So that's like a very old project of mine, but I think a lot of people, just because of the name, a lot of people discover it now and think that this is an IDE to use with Avalonia, and it did used to work. Maybe it still works. I've not tried it for a long time. I can recommend a pretty good tutorial series on YouTube. Mike, remind me the name of the guy. Angel 6.
Angel 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can we put in the chat there a link to it, perhaps?
Yeah, I'll find a link to it.
But he did many years ago a very nice tutorial series on YouTube about WPF, and it was like one of the ones that I found back in the day, and they're quite easy to follow. He will take you through like step by step, and then you'll find out, oh, this step works fine, and then he'll start showing you, but actually there's a better way of doing this to make the code more reusable. So he introduces the correct way to do it, like gradually. So each video takes you on like a little learning journey, I find, which I really like. And he's basically reproducing that same tutorial series at the moment for Avalonia. Yeah, it's pretty high quality, the videos.
Yeah, his content is great, and we definitely want to continue with creating video content. There is obviously capacity issues. Creating video content is really time consuming. So like I've produced a couple of videos where it's like 2.5 minutes to 5 minutes that actually gets published, and that'll take between like 6 to 12 hours to get everything done in terms of create the content, write the script, record it, edit it, and get it published. So it's a lot of work. I don't envy these YouTubers and influencers that do it as a full-time gig. But if you know people within the community that are building or creating content on YouTube that you think would be a good fit for Avalonia, then let us know who they are. We'll reach out to them and we'll see if we can get some collaboration going, because it's something that we do want to improve, and we're happy to sponsor content creation when it provides value, like YouTube series. Right, what else have we got? This is a good question. Any strategy on handling very old GitHub issues that are most likely not relevant or fixed?
I think this is the kind of the reason that people use the auto close issue things. I hate them. I really don't like automatically closing issues. I know some people don't like going onto a repository and seeing 3,000 open issues, but I would much rather see that personally than just having issues that haven't had activity beyond a certain amount of time closed automatically, personally. The only way that they're going to get handled is, first of all, if the people who opened them go back, look at their old issues, see if they can reproduce and close them, or if we do it. If we do it, that's going to take time away from actually working on other things. So it would be better if the people who open the issues could take a look at them. Maybe we should go through all those old issues with a bot, pinging the issue opener and asking if they could kindly check if it's still an issue. I don't know what results that will have.
I think that's a good idea. There was some debate yesterday. I say debate. There's a disgruntled Maui user complaining about their issues being, I don't think they were closed, but they're like put on the back burner or backlog. And it is difficult because I sometimes will go through our issues and look for stuff that I know is obviously not relevant anymore and that I know that we fixed. But there's actually very few of them that you can just glance over and be really confident. Like most of them require you to go and make a demo and really investigate, and that does take a lot of time.
I'd estimate that if the whole team maybe spent 2 months going through issues, we could probably close all the non-relevant ones, but that would be 2 months of doing nothing else.
Yeah. Maybe with V11, we close everything and we start from scratch. That's not a serious suggestion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, so we ask, an easy way to contribute to the project is to help us with the issues. So if you want to start going through, and it's a great way to get involved with the project.
Very good point, actually. Yeah, that's a great way the community can help out.
In fact, everybody that works with us full time on Avalonia, most of them started out in that way by volunteering in the community and starting to work through issues or test things, and then eventually starting to get involved with submitting pull requests. So if you were interested in one day working more with us, it would be a great way to sort of get in to find a way in.
Yeah, we've kind of I don't think I can think of anyone that's working for the company that hasn't kind of proven themselves through community contributions. And we kind of see it as a staging ground for hiring. And that's something that Xamarin used to do as well. We used to, just pick out of the community the people that were really adding value and that they were a known entity. Because hiring is like one of the most incredibly difficult things to get right, and it's so important. So yeah, if you ever one day in the future want to join Avalonia full time and work with us, or you just want to support the project, and it doesn't have to be financially, then contributing by writing docs, dealing with comments, just tagging comments, any contribution is welcome. Anything that you can take off our plate.
Especially given that we've paused community contributions in terms of PRs, which should be opening back up soon, by the way. We had to do that just because reviewing PRs is one of the most time-consuming things there is. So to try and expedite V11, felt like we had to do that. So yeah, especially while community PRs are closed, that would be a really useful, from my point of view, use of time.
Awesome. So another question was, when will the markup declaration and Maui integration NuGet packages be released? That's a good question. I think I seem to find myself saying good question when I mean it's a difficult question. So the Maui integration. So a bit of background on that. We started it in November, just literally like the week before the .NET Conf. Before we were invited. So we were invited to .NET Conf, and we kind of pulled this out of the bag. There's something to demo. And we've worked with Jonathan Dick, who's, I think, the principal PM or principal developer for the Maui team. And he's kind of helped improve it. But we're not at a point where we want to invest a huge amount of effort in building it. So it again comes back to resources and where we focus our attention. So we do see that there is some demand for Maui integration, and we think the benefits are there, but there's also a lot of work that would need to be done to get that production ready. And the Maui team, in terms of developers, they've got about the same amount of developers as we do, so they don't have a huge amount of resources, and they don't have managerial buy-in to dedicate resources to getting it over the line. To be frank with you, we're a small business, we're an open source project, and I don't think we should be volunteering our developer resources to a company that's got a market cap of $2.2 trillion. I think if it's important, they can put their hand in their pocket and sponsor it, and we'll get it over the line, and we'll get some resources to do it. But I would rather use our engineering resources to make sure that we're rock solid on mobile, and that we provide an experience that's good enough that you want to just use Avalonia for all of your apps, and that Maui doesn't even enter the equation for you. So that would be my response to the Maui integration. With that said, it is open source. If you want to play around with it and you want to build it out yourself, then no one's going to stop you, and we'll answer any questions to help you make that a thing. But I don't think right now we're going to spend that energy on building it ourselves.
Mike, there was I sent you a link in the chat on our chat to Javier's efforts.
Yes, so Javier, who is one of the Maui developers, I'll put this on the chat on YouTube. He's also taken that work and extended it. So maybe he wants to take on development of that. But yeah, from our side, we're not going to continue with that for the moment. So one more question was, loving the work on the docs v2 and v11. Thank you. Any plans on adding a subsection gathering various small-scale Q&As, for example, working on styles for controls hidden between nested templated controls? Yes. So we're overhauling our docs. That's a big thing for us this year, is to move from having arguably the worst docs for any UI tech in the .NET ecosystem to having the best docs. And that's requiring an awful lot of work. So we've got a guy called Mark that he's a professional technical writer and project manager, and he's responsible for docs v2. So all the content that you're seeing there. And what's great about Mark is that his background is more ASP.NET. So Avalonia is relatively new to him. So he's kind of hitting all of the roadblocks that new users would be hitting. With the work that he's doing, we're going to be migrating off of Gitbook onto a new documentation system called Docusaurus, which is from Facebook. And with that, we're going to update the navigation approach, and we'll have subsections, which will include small scale, we're calling them like quick guides, but they are like laser focused on like, how do I do X? So one example is, how do I use Google Fonts? Because that's something I hit like a month ago. I couldn't quite get the XAML syntax right for using the font, and I had to ask the team, how do I do this? And so we're creating these really small samples that just show one thing. So that you can clone the repo, and there'll also be a written guide with it. You know, how do I use Google Fonts? How do I load images? And in that case, it's showing you with XAML bindings to the assets folder from view models and loading in remote images from the web. But yeah, they're going to be really small, laser focused examples showing as much as we can. And there's an open discussion on GitHub where we're asking for feedback on what examples do you want to see? What should we make sure that we include in our docs? But it's it's a work in progress. I'm not sure if we'll have the Docusaurus portal ready for V11 launch, but it's coming very soon. Right, what else have we got? Are there any plans to improve native component embedding? A good example would be Google Maps. Can you integrate it as a top-level element, but there's no way to add components on top of it?
That's one for Nikita. Yes, airspace issues are a problem. I don't know about any plans there. Nikita's not here, so that's a question for him.
Can you explain airspace problems, just for those who aren't aware?
Yeah, it's basically when you're embedding a component, you're embedding a window on top of your window. And so anything you draw on that window is going to be drawn behind the child window, the embedded window. So there's no way to actually render on top of the child window. I assume that one way to get around that would be to render it to an off-screen texture and then put that texture into the application instead of actually embedding the child control. But then you would have problems with input, and you'd have to route the input to the child control. It's not a simple problem. I don't know about any plans to improve it. Nikita probably has lots of ideas, but I'm not sure where they currently are.
Yeah, not an easy one to answer.
By the way, if somebody is looking for maps controls, not necessarily embedding, there are some maps libraries that support Google Maps, Bing Maps, things like that. I think if you search on GitHub, is it gmap.net was one of them, and then maybe there's another library called Live Charts 2, which has maps. I haven't looked at that, but that may well also do Google Maps.
So somebody has asked about helpers, like a toolbox for common cross-platform issues. I think it would be helpful. Great question. This is an interesting one because I was speaking to James Montemagno, who is a former colleague. We worked at Xamarin on the advocacy team, and then at Microsoft, and he was kind of product owner of what was once upon a time Xamarin Essentials, and it's been renamed Maui Essentials, although I'm not quite sure of its relationship in terms of dependencies on Maui. What I was saying to him is that I don't really want to fragment the ecosystem, but there is this Maui Essentials library that does a lot of stuff that would be useful for Avalonia developers. But number one, the naming is horrible because it's not just relevant to Maui. And number two, the platform support isn't broad enough. Maui doesn't support web, it doesn't support Linux. And so I was asking around, would they, well, they certainly won't rename it, but would they be willing to take on contributions from us that would enable a broader array of platforms to be supported? And the answer was basically no. So we kind of, I think when we talked about it, we were thinking that we would start with things like the camera controls. So we'd create a way to interact with cameras cross-platform, and on desktop it would use your webcam. And we would test that out as a first step into creating some kind of helpers and toolbox for common cross-platform scenarios. But again, it comes down to resources. So right now we're focused primarily on V11. But yes, we are keen to solve the common issues that developers find across the various different platforms. That will probably begin, I would say, within 6 months. We would start on that, but it isn't the highest priority. As I say, you can get reasonably far with the Maui Essentials, depending on what platforms you want to support.
For people who have been developing desktop for a long time, although there are a few things that you might want a helper for, like opening a link in a browser or something like that, it's really once you get to mobile that those kind of helper things become way more important. And I did see a question somewhere that was talking about the post V11 roadmap, which there's nothing set in stone, but one of the things that we are talking about doing is developing the user experience of mobile, or the developer experience of mobile, so that having those kind of cross-platform helpers will really fit in as part of that.
So our good friend Bunny has asked, what are the areas Avalonia will not touch but lead to third-party commercial products? So I guess Bunny's looking to build some commercial things around Avalonia. So I think in terms of like third-party controls, that's something that we definitely want to partner with people. So Bill's on the call from ActivePro, and we're keen to support people like Bill and ActivePro and work with third-party control vendors to build out the ecosystem, because technologies like Avalonia live and die by the ecosystem that they exist in, and we don't want to go and we can't do everything. So our focus is right now, we're focused on, from a commercial perspective, compatibility products. So we started with XPF, which is WPF, but we have plans to do more. And outside of that, we have plans to create value adds for the broad Avalonia community. So it will be about creating tools, things that make your lives easier, and dramatically improve your productivity, so that there's enough of an incentive for you to open your wallets and help support Avalonia ultimately. So yeah, for the most part, we don't have a list of what we're not going to touch, but third-party controls we want to partner with. But if you have an idea and you want to kind of run it by us, we're not going to steal your idea and just go off and do it. We've got far too many things, and we have a roadmap pretty nailed down for what we want to do.
Really good idea, though. What if it's a great idea?
It's a really good idea. Maybe we'll have to buy Bunny's company. Okay, so speaking of build, it's just asking about our Visual Studio extension and will it be improved post V11. Now, I've seen some stuff that's being worked on internally for the Visual Studio extension. There are improvements coming. I don't think it's going to touch some of the issues that Bill is probably thinking about, but it certainly will bring us more in line with what's available from other UI toolkits. That, I think, when we spoke to Daniel this morning, he was saying that it's probably be ready by the end of the month. So it should fall in line with the V11 release. There's a few things that we need to improve with our Visual Studio extension. So there's some CPU usage issues with the previewer. There's some IntelliSense issues. There's a lot that we can do around IntelliSense to improve that experience. And we do need to invest in it. The majority of our users are using Visual Studio, so that is on our list of priorities for sure. As I say, it's a work in progress. Somebody's asked about basically common converters. So I think that would probably fall into like the toolkit. So if we built an Avalonia specific toolkit, we've already got some useful converters built in. I think maybe we should probably do enum to string as an automatic.
We should definitely have some enum converters in there. It's something that every time I have to do that, I think, I should add these, but then there are 500 other things to do that are more important, so it never gets done.
That's a low-hanging fruit. So maybe if you can create a discussion on GitHub, then we can get some feedback from the community about which converters we should build in, and we'll get that expanded. Another question from Bunny. Do we have rendering other than Skier? Flutter's making a new renderer, and we see that Skier Sharp is not supporting clear type well.
We could. Our rendering backends are already abstracted out. We currently have two. We have Direct 2D, which is pretty much unmaintained at the moment, but should still work. So adding a new renderer should certainly be possible, and it would mean us no longer having to depend on Skier Sharp, maybe, which has been a source of numerous problems. Yeah, if their renderer looks good and we can use it, it has .NET bindings, I don't see why not. It's not something we've explored at the moment, but certainly
it kind of needs a new renderer to come along that looks like it's going to be full featured, and it's going to be widely adopted, a bit like Skier has been. We did have Direct 2D, which I think it's still in the code base, isn't it? Yeah. Regarding the clear type, though, I'm pretty sure Benedict has actually fixed that. So you do get clear type on Windows at the moment.
So I think the new renderer from Flutter is called Impala. If that's going purely off my very bad memory, but it is something we discussed, and we talked about maybe adding, and we need to investigate if it's even possible, but adding Impala support for V12, because that could be quite a neat feature to have. We don't need to depend on Skier Sharp. So this is a conversation that I had with David, the principal PM of Maui. Ski Sharp it's maintained by a very, very smart chap from Microsoft called Matthew, but he just doesn't have the time allocated to really dedicate to it, and it's a big, complex project. Microsoft is, focused primarily on Maui and firefighting that problem, and so David was questioning, what would we do if there was a security vulnerability discovered with Skier, or the version of Skier that Skier Sharp uses. And what I said to him is, we have our own bindings to Skier that uses the latest version. It comes back to that thing of, I don't really want us to fragment the ecosystem. I'd rather we kept everyone working together, collaborating where possible. But if we needed to, it'd probably be an uncomfortable morning for Nikita, but we could get packages out that use the latest version of Skier, and drop Skier Sharp as a dependency, and use our own Skier bindings. So we the renderer side of things, we've got lots of options available to us.
The problem with using our own Skier bindings, of course, is that often people want to use Skier to do their own rendering, and they will want to use Skier Sharp. So that will.
Although we have got a solution for that in our own bindings, so you could still use Skier Sharp at the same time as the new bindings, but nothing's fully decided on yet. We've basically done most of the work, but at this point, coming up to V11, we didn't want to make that change at all yet. We're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with Skier Sharp.
So we've got about 8 minutes left. So let's get through the last few questions. So Bill again is asking about official recommendation on casing of control string class strings. Pseudo class is a lowercase. It's a good question. Maybe Stephen can pick this one up.
I don't think we have any official recommendation, but I certainly prefer the first two, personally.
Does CSS have a standard for those things?
No, I don't think so. You can use whatever you want.
So I'm just glancing through questions.
We should wade into officially. It will turn into a tabs versus spaces thing.
How much is the team focused on mobile at the moment? Maui is a horrible developer experience, and I think Avalonia could snatch much of its user base. So we have one guy that's working full-time on improving mobile. We will expand that. Let's say most of the team is focused on just getting V11 out the door at the moment. Once we have V11, we can kind of reallocate resources. Mobile is a huge opportunity for us. Xamarin Forms is end of life in terms of support in about a year's time. So we feel like we've got that 12-month window in order to nail down mobile and capture some of those Forms users. But yeah, we agree. Mobile is definitely important, and I think Maui is in a state of flux, which is something that we want to capitalize on and try and coax people over to building their applications with Avalonia. When can we get hot reload, C# and XAML? Dan?
Well, implementing this is really, really difficult because it requires changes in our XAML compiler. So we have to capture information about that, and then it has to be injected into the application at runtime, and we have to save state and make sure that the state of the views is saved. There's been some community efforts that have kind of done something similar. Can you remember what the name of those were, Stephen, maybe?
Isn't there one that was in our org?
I think there are separate issues. I think you were talking about XAML hot reload, Dan, but there's also hot reload of C#, which, as far as I know, because of our XAML compiler, because that writes IL, then C# hot reload doesn't work with our assemblies, if I remember correctly. So there are two separate things here, I think. Is that right, Dan?
Yeah, in fact, some of the projects where people have made like a Fluent API to, and I forget the names of them now. vSlav was working on one of them, and there's a couple of other flavors where you can write an Avalonia app just in pure C# without any XAML. I'm pretty sure in those hot reload actually does work. But once you put our compiled XAML in there, it just all goes to pieces, unfortunately. But it's definitely something we want to get working, and we most likely will get it working once we got more time, once we got past V11 and it becomes, and we get some resource to work on it.
Yep. Something a lot of people have asked about. I personally find that the live previewer gets me like 99% of the way there. So the WASM playground loads pretty fast. Do you get that out of the box, or did you optimize the app to achieve that?
There's quite a few things you can do. So when you run a debug build on your machine, it doesn't AOT compile the assemblies. So it's running like an interpreter to process all the IL, which is, it works, but it's a bit slower. So you can enable AOT. The best place to look is, ahead of time compilation. The best place to look is we've got a repo for our Solitaire application, which Mike will probably post the link in the chat. But you'll see the settings in the project file, and I think it says like, oh, if the condition is, if it's a release build, it sets a few extra properties that do that. The other thing that you can do is when you publish your application to the web server, is you can use Broccoli compression. And if you look at the GitHub Actions file in that Solitaire repo, you'll see there's a kind of a .NET tool that vSlav, one of the guys from our community, has written that will compress all the output of your application to .br files, which is Broccoli is a compression that I believe Google started it originally. It allows a file to be streamed from a web server, but it's very, very efficient. So essentially, like our Solitaire application, if I remember correctly, it's something like 3.5 megabytes or 4 megabytes. It's actually transferred from the server, because with a web application, it's not just loading the application. You've got to download all the code first. And uncompressed, they might be like 30 or 40 megabytes, but it gets it down to like 3.5 megabytes compressed. So that's like absolutely essential for a WASM application. It doesn't really slow down the load properly, but then having it fully optimized and AOT compiled, and it will load super, super fast.
Awesome. And the Solitaire, I assume this is in relation to the Solitaire repo that I just linked, which doesn't have a README. Create an issue, we'll get a README added. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're about on time now. So really appreciate everyone joining the call today and all of the questions. Hopefully we answered everything. If we didn't, we'll be doing one next month. The initial idea was to have these for our GitHub subscribers. I think we're going to maybe tweak it so that if you just, not subscribers, sponsors, I should say, that if you sponsor any amount, I think we should let people come into these rather than having it in the more expensive tiers, because it's nice to get some opportunity to connect and chat with everyone.
By the way, the last person to comment in there about Broccoli, Broccoli requires the server that you've deployed it onto to support it. So it doesn't just work out the box. The server has to serve the files with Broccoli. So I've been using Azure Static Web Pages, I think it's called. That just supports it out of the box. If there's the file that's going to be downloaded, if there's a copy of the file with a .br extension, it serves that one to the web browser. So make sure that your server supports it, and then it should work.
Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and I'll hopefully see you all here next month.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.